Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. If you didn't know, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Elite Collegiate Planning. Make sure to share and tag us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of College Knowledge. I am your co-host today, Mr. Joe Kearns, joined by the ever-impressive CEO of the College Planning Network and Elite Collegiate Planning, Mr. Dave Kozak. Dave,
good morning, Joe. I wish I had one of those did you knows.
Yeah.
Did you know that the FAFSA is not going to open until December 1st this year?
That sounds familiar, Dave.
Yeah.
I did know that.
Tale as old as time.
Are there Vegas betting odds on if it'll actually open on December 1st? Because I'd like to lay some money.
I'm not even going there right now.
I'm sure we'll get into that in a whole nother episode about what you families need to expect from
for sure
yet another year of FAFSA delays and the potential consequences of all that. But not the topic of discussion for today's episode. I'm actually very excited for today. We have a great guest. He is from the Department of Mathematics at the University of Florida, Mr. Kevin Knudson. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks. I'm supposed to do the gator chop now. Wait a minute.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
All right. Yeah. It's in my contract, I think. Yeah.
Love it. So I was saying I was excited because I definitely will touch on it, but my original college thought process career, I was actually a math major. I always thought that I was going to be doing that. So I'm very interested in some questions because I know there's some personal questions I'm going to have to maybe help some students avoid the mistakes that I made.
Sure.
With my decision, and to see how maybe if there's somebody that's in my shoes and kind of if I would have talked to you all those many years ago to kind of understand what I potentially was not prepared for. I'll put it that way. So, Kevin, but we'll get into my backstory. But how about yours? How did you get into this field? Where are you coming from? How did you get to where you are today?
So, I don't know. I was always one of those kids that was, quote, good at math, right? So my first, I still have my first mathematical memory. So this is funny. So I always like to tell people, I was 6 and we lived in Memphis when I was in first grade. And my teacher was teaching us about tally marks, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the slash for the 5 and all that. And so she was getting students to come up, date myself here, to the overhead projector. And she would tell us a number and we had to write down the tally marks. So she gave me a hard one, which was 8. Okay, so then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. And my classmates cheered, yay, Kevin is amazing at math. I'm like, I can count to 8. It's great. But anyway, so from there, it was always the thing that I liked the most and that I was kind of best at. And then when I was about 15, I decided, okay, I'm going to go to college and be a math major. And then I'm going to go to grad school and get my PhD and be a math professor. And then I did it. And this was like, the audacity of this. I mean, nobody in my family had ever gone to college. I was, and so the idea that, I come from very, working class background, and my mom was a bookkeeper and my stepfather was a machinist. And, we lived in an apartment, we didn't have much, but I just thought, well, this is what I want to do and I'm going to go do it. My mom thought I should have been a physician, of course. But you have to do what you're interested in, right? Yeah. I mean, I wasn't interested in being a physician. So, so I and then I went off to college at Virginia Tech on an Air Force ROTC scholarship, as it turns out. So I was in the Corps of Cadets there, which was an interesting experience that I could talk about if you want. And then, but at the end of that, back when our government used to actually be somewhat responsible and cut budgets from time to time, they had too many cadets, basically. So they had a voluntary disenrollment plan, and all I had to do was pay back the scholarship, which I did eventually. In my mid-30s, and I went to graduate school at Duke, and earned my PhD there. So I never thought I would do anything else, which is kind of strange. I mean, I'm kind of one of those unusual folks, because you've talked to enough faculty and people at universities to know that students change their majors, and I know this too. They change their majors two, three, 4 times on average or something. I started as a math major day one and never stopped, and so here I am.
Well, and there's a little more in my eyes, because it was at age 15 that you set course on, and that is extraordinarily rare.
Yeah, and, well, when I was, I was into I like doing math contests and stuff. There's all this. It's way more competitive now, but there was a low grade competition scene back in the '80s, and I don't know. I really liked it. It was the thing that made the most sense to me, and I loved other things too. I mean, like the only thing I wasn't really good at in school was like visual art. Like I can't draw, but I was pretty good at everything. But math just really, it's so beautiful, and it's so clean. And there's this idea that there's always a right answer, which we'll talk about more later. This might have been your difficulties there, Joe. But when you're coming up through school, there's this idea that, look, there's a right answer, and you're going to get there, and that's really appealing. And also, I sort of like logic puzzles, and that's really what math is. It's applied logic, essentially.
Yeah.
So a question on that, it pertains to the students that you teach. How many do you find have that same sort of definitive pathway early?
There's 2 kinds of math majors. Well, maybe 3. The thing is, when I decided I was going to do this, people had always asked me when I was still in high school, well, what do you do to get a PhD in math? And the truth is, I had no idea. I assumed, I guess you write another calculus book, right? Because as you're coming up K through 12, like calculus gets held up as wait till you get to calculus. Oh, man, it's the top of the, and you get to university and you realize, it's cool and all, and we're going to teach you that. But no, I mean, the math major starts with, proofwriting and stuff like that. So there are some students who understand that from the get-go. So I've noticed more and more over the years, we get some students, and this is not most, but a handful, who have already really absorbed higher level mathematics even in high school. And that's possible, and it helps to be in an urban area. So you guys are in Philadelphia. I'm pretty sure there's probably a math circle for middle and high school students where these opportunities exist because you have such great universities in your area, and there's a sort of a concentration of people, and the Bay Area is really famous for this too, where like really sort of students who have a real affinity for this can work on advanced mathematics and things like that. We get a few of those. Then there's people like me who are just really good at math, and they just want to be a math major. And they get into it, and at first it's great because it's the calculus type stuff, calculus 1, 2, 3, differential equations. There's an answer and there's a procedure, and you know how to go about it. And then they hit the sort of sophomore level stuff where it becomes a little more abstract, and you either get it or you don't. So that's something we can talk more about later. And then there's the third kind of math major, which is actually most of the majors, which is they didn't start that way. So most incoming first-year students, we have very few who declare mathematics as a major. We have some, 20 maybe, and we're talking a freshman class of 7,000 here. So but what we end up with is there are a lot of students who start in engineering, for example, or computer science, and they discover that, again, in my experience, a lot of high school guidance counselors, and this is not a knock on them, it's hard work and they're doing the best they can. They suggest to students who are good at math that they become an engineer, because you got to be good at math to be an engineer. That's true, but it's a completely different skill set, right? I would be a terrible engineer. I mean, I'm fairly handy around the house, but I'm not an engineer. And so students start there and they realize that's not for them, and then they've taken a lot of math, and they are still they're good at this sort of computational kind of thing, and so then we get a lot of majors that way too. And so there's all these different paths into it that lead to the same place, and so we have about 300 majors. So my guess is, again, I should know this better than I do since I'm chair of the department, but my intuition suggests that 3/4 of them did not start as math majors.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is there anything definitive in your mind that would indicate, and I'm going back to that high school guidance counselor,
Mhm.
because it's been
Mhm.
very commonplace. If you're good at science, go to medical school or go
Right.
pre-med. If
Sure.
you're good at math, go to engineering, maybe
Mhm.
accounting if you're on the business side of it. Is there anything in
Sure.
your mind that indicates or dictates more clearly what would make you better at math than engineering? Is there
Um,
something we could target there?
you know, so for engineering, you got to be good at physics too, right? Um, and I was okay at physics. And for a while, I thought about being a double major in physics in college until my sophomore year. I walked into this junior level course in general relativity, and I couldn't understand it. So I dropped it and took philosophy instead. Um, yeah, I mean, my physics knowledge stopped at physics one. Um, well, engineering is just problem solving too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're really they're just trying to solve problems. The Apollo 13 thing. They dump the stuff out on the table. What can we do with this?
Yeah.
If that isn't how you approach things, just kind of naturally, engineering might be a bit difficult for you, I think. And I don't really do that in a mechanical way. I do it now that I'm sort of more in administrative roles, I do it in a sort of systems way. Like I can think about how the department functions inside of the college and the college inside the university and all these kind of moving parts for, administratively in higher ed. And that's kind of an engineering problem, but it's more of a, systems engineering sort of thing.
Yeah.
If you don't naturally think that way, engineering is going to be tough. On the other hand, math, again, the way we teach math K through 12, we've stripped a lot of the sort of interesting, creative, frankly, artistic side out of it. Math is right at the nexus of the sciences and the humanities. It's actually a very creative discipline, and I don't think people think of it that way. But mathematics is extremely creative, and I always like to say we're the art department of the science college,
Hmm.
right? That's really what we are, and so again, being good at computation is a necessary prerequisite. But when you get to the more abstract things, um, then maybe that doesn't click for some students, and that's where we lose math majors.
Mhm.
So I actually I want to advocate not just for mathematics. I want to advocate for mathematical sciences generally,
Yeah.
because there are other ways where you can put your mathematics abilities to good use. Statistics is an excellent major. It's a little more computational, not completely, right? There's a lot of creativity in designing experiments and things like that, and knowing how to work with that. But and increasingly, we have a major here at UF in data science, where it's a good combination of computational skill, coding, machine learning, all this stuff that there's a lot of careers in that too, where if you sort of have a sort of facility for computation and you like thinking about structures of data and things like that, that's another really good opportunity. So mathematics is actually way more diverse than it was when I started. When I started college in 1987. If you were a math major, there was assumption that you were either going to go to graduate school and be a PhD mathematician and be a professor, or if you've just stopped at the end of 4 years, you were going to be a high school teacher.
Mhm.
And that's just not true. I mean, we still certainly have plenty of that going on, but it's just not true anymore. There's so many interesting careers where a math major or a statistics degree or a data science degree can really lead to just an incredibly rewarding career with a lot of interesting intellectual capacity required.
Now, with how it works at UF,
Mhm.
when would a student have to know what that path potentially is? Like,
Yeah.
how far into does it have to be declared going in year one that I'm going into actuarial science, computer
Mhm.
science, like the statistics side? Or is it you kind of come in and then you start with math, and if you lead into one of those areas, you don't have to add a whole lot of extra years of education? How does that work?
Yeah. So what's nice is if you're sort of quantitatively minded, the first year and a half, even 2 years of a math and statistics and data science degree, kind of the same,
Mhm.
right? You've got to take the calculus sequence. You've got to maybe take differential equations or not. That sort of depends. If you're thinking about, you might want to be, in data science, you start with some programming. And we actually, for our data science major, I developed that with the chair of statistics. We got together and put it together. His department actually runs it, which is great because I didn't have the capacity. but yeah. We were, really close partners and all of that. And we developed a couple of courses that the students needed, and one of them was sort of an intro. Calc 1 is the only prerequisite, and it's intro to computational math with Python. So students learn to code in Python, which is sort of the standard coding language in data science these days. And whether you go on to be a data science major or a math major or a stats major or even a computer science major, there's no problem with having taken that course. It's extremely useful. And then it sets you up. It's really good because then you sort of know, what do I like most here? Do I like working with the computer and Python coding and all that? If you do, great. There's plenty of math things where that's good, statistics where that's really good, data science, even computer science. If you decide, I don't really like this coding side of things, well, that's going to tell you something. Maybe data science isn't for you. Maybe stats isn't for you, but maybe pure mathematics is. And so, although I'm a pure mathematician and anymore, I have to code some things. I'm terrible at it. I took one Fortran class in 1988, but luckily Google exists, and so you can usually hack together Python code well enough. MATLAB exists too, which is also useful. So those first couple of years really help you suss out what you like, what sort of appeals to you. And then that first, quote, real math class, here it's called Sets and Logic. It's sort of introduction to proofwriting. And that's where we get the bifurcation, where students say, this isn't math. Like, we have students literally sitting in that class saying, this isn't math. It's like, I'm sorry to tell you, this is actually exactly what it is. This is the logical foundations of mathematics. Yeah. This is where you learn the techniques where you're going to prove things later on. If you don't like this, there's an issue, which is not to say that you still can't be a math major. There's sort of more, there's pure math. There's also applied math. And at UF, we have a lot of, and this is true in most departments at a big university, we have some exceptional applied mathematicians, and they're more about, in our case, we have a lot of mathematical biologists, which they're doing, population modeling, disease modeling, ecological stuff. One of my colleagues models cancer growth and wound repair. It's like there's a lot of really interesting mathematics behind all of that. And once you get past, we make you take some sort of pure mathematics, but you could focus your electives on the applied things. Maybe you're interested in fluid dynamics, which is kind of very physics, but also very heavy math. So, like I said earlier, it's a very diverse thing, and but we still insist that everybody learn to write a proof by induction, for example. You can't get away with not doing that. We make you take calculus for real, advanced calculus, where you sort of understand the foundational stuff. But it's possible to do lots of interesting things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's pretty, it's definitely interesting. And I know that you hit the nail on the head, at least for me, because I will get to my story soon. Mm-hmm. But I would say without a doubt, the biggest, I think, assumption that if a child wants to be a math major is exactly what they're looking to be, a teacher or a professor. Mm-hmm. And is that probably the biggest misconception or myth that exists in potentially looking at math as a major in college that parents should know?
Yeah, I think it really is. Also, the idea that most people think we just do arithmetic with really big numbers, which is not what we do. A math degree, I like to think of it this way. We're basically teaching students how to think. Mm-hmm. And there's a quantitative angle to it, but it's excellent preparation for example, for law school. I just happened to, one of our former students who graduated maybe 7 years ago, he came through town and he wanted to stop by and talk about, he's thinking about maybe going back to grad school, but he graduated from UF with a math degree, went to law school, and now he works at a law firm in Los Angeles. And he even said to me, he said, being a math major was great because what is law? What is being a lawyer? You're arguing logically. You're trying to make pieces fit together. Math majors do really well on Wall Street. I mean, undergrads can go straight to Wall Street. My best friend from grad school, he wrote his PhD, went to work on Wall Street. He's had a very successful career. Some of the biggest hedge funds out there are actually run by mathematicians. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. Other jobs that people don't really think about that math majors can do. Well, there's data analytics, right? So companies really like, people who can think quantitatively, and there's a lot of analytics type jobs. The single biggest employer of mathematicians in the United States, do you know what it is?
You're not.
Here's your quiz. The National Security Agency. So there are really interesting careers at NSA. They can't tell. I don't know exactly what they do. They can't tell me, but I know several people who work there, and they really enjoy it. It's really interesting work. They hire a lot of mathematicians. They have a lot of summer programs for college students, internship type programs that are really, you can get a sense of what goes on. They won't give you security clearance, of course, but you get a sense for what's going on there.
Okay.
Various government labs, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they have a lot of mathematicians. There are various government labs around the country that hire mathematicians. Amazon, right? Supply chain type stuff. Now, those students tend to come more from industrial and systems engineering programs, but there's a ton of math in that. They're basically mathematicians. They just they think about logistics and system stuff, but that's all math. And so Amazon and companies like FedEx, they need logistics folks, so they hire a lot of mathematicians too. A lot of really good careers. One of my PhD students always wanted to go to industry. He did not want to be a professor, and he went to work for a large corporation. I probably shouldn't say what it is, but somewhere in Chicago, and doing data analytics for him. And he's been very happy. So lots to do. So yeah, it's not just about being high school teachers. In fact, very few of our students want to be high school teachers, which is actually kind of problematic.
Yeah.
I mean, our best students are going on doing great things, but I wish more of them were interested in being high school teachers, but that's a different conversation, right?
I mean, we're talking about an age where there's math in almost everything. I mean, as a business owner, the amount of analytics that I have to do just to figure out what the next move is
right.
I plateaued at calculus. That was I was like, all right, well, I got it barely. We're going to move on from there. But with the amount of computer technology, with the analytic algorithms, with everything that's going on, even in marketing right now, like I'm going back into marketing. Like, you need to have a math degree to understand the marketing, the essential where everything's coming from. So I would agree that it seems more now than ever that type of logical thinking is necessary in that. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
NSA, huh?
NSA.
I've got so many questions on that one. We're going to leave it alone, but I have so many questions.
I can't answer them. I don't know.
I understand.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the other thing that I've been made aware of throughout these different podcasts and different hosts, like accounting. Like I didn't realize, I used to think okay, I don't want to do people's taxes. I was great with numbers, loved formulas. And somebody said, look at accounting. I said, and then when we start really diving into it, it's all mathematical formulas and understanding okay. So this is math.
That's right. Yeah. And so, our US Business College is really strong, and their accounting and finance majors are heavily mathematical. And I mean, and again, those students, they go straight to Wall Street, and those firms are really coming and recruiting here. They've had good experience with our students.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, the kind of what you said, like, hey, if they're coming down there, is there anything that makes UF a little different when it comes to how mathematics is taught? Is there anything different that you guys do that makes you a little unique, that maybe you are a little crewed a little bit differently?
That's a good question. I mean, calculus is kind of the same everywhere, right? That's not, well, I say that. That's not entirely true. I mean, some places teach it exclusively in small classes. Some people do it in bigger lectures. We do it in bigger lectures, but we have professional, instructional faculty. That's what they do. They're not, they don't have a research assignment. They teach our calculus courses, and they're spectacular. And our student success rates are really good. They're about as good as they can be, because there's sort of always 10% of students who, I just think they don't show up. That's just sort of what happens. It's any student that we admit can get through the courses here. And, and we believe that. We provide all the material. We have excellent TAs. We have lots of free tutoring. We have a tutoring center. It's right underneath my office, and it's staffed by our grad students and really good undergrads. The thing I'm proudest of, just sort of as a local thing, this is probably getting in the weeds, but I'll do it anyway. It costs money to take courses, and not just your tuition, right? So there are these online homework systems that the publishers all have, and essentially students were paying to do their homework, right? So upwards of $100 a semester. So I'm kind of big on equity because I was one of those kids who didn't have any money, and so we built our own in-house online homework system, and we give it away. So, and we use open source textbooks. And so we've saved our students, on the order of, $3 or $4 million over the last 4 years.
Wow.
Just by doing that. And I'm a big believer in that kind of thing. So our students report they really like that. They like not having to pay for stuff, but also they think the system actually works better because they've used the other ones, the commercial products that are kind of clunky. So, the way we do math here, we also have a pretty significant online presence. We have an online university, UF Online. It's been rated #1. I'm supposed to say that too. But it actually is quite good. And yeah, that's right. The Gator Chomp. Thank you.
I got you. Got you back.
But I've developed a couple courses for that too. And online math is weird, and we can talk about that if you want. But several of our students, and especially post-pandemic, where they kind of got used to it, they actually prefer to take their math classes online. And we've got them up through calculus and diff-EQs, and it's working pretty well, I gotta say. Yeah,
I couldn't imagine learning stuff online.
Well, there are advantages though. So here's one advantage. You have the videos are pre-recorded, right? It's not like a live. It's not like this, right? And so you can watch it as many times as you want. You can slow it down. You can pause it. You can watch it at twice the speed, which is what a lot of students do, but okay. And you still have access to faculty. We still have to have office hours online. We still, we still have all the same tutoring is available. And then, it's flexible. You don't have to show up at 8:30 in the morning to your calculus class. The downside, of course, is that you have to have enough discipline to actually do it. But that's true of any online course. That has nothing to do with math.
100%.
Yep.
So to lead in my next question, I'll go to my story here. So in high school, I was I was always gifted with math. It was always very easy to me. Algebra was, when it first got introduced in like 5th or 6th grade, I would say, yeah, the answer's, A = 2. And the teacher I wouldn't be given the correct marks because I didn't show my work. I could look at a problem and just know the answer.
Sure. Yeah.
So the hardest part for me was actually showing how I got the answer. Like, to me, it was just logical. It's how do people not understand this? So it came very natural. So all throughout high school, that was always my best subject. I played sports, get there and I say, okay, what do I want to do as a career? I want to be a math teacher and coach sports. That was it. So I'll be a math and hey, I'll pick a college where I can still play sports because I can be a math major anywhere, right? Like, what's college doesn't offer math. So that was kind of my mindset. Yes, I made a lot of mistakes throughout all of that. When I got to the college I selected, which was mainly to play football and baseball, they did a placement exam to figure out what courses you would take. And I scored so well on the math that they put me into what I believe was a calculus 2 or 3, 2-semester, 10-credit lab. Well, the problem was in high school, I opted for honors algebra because I knew I'd get a really good grade versus taking Calc 1.
Okay.
So my first year of college, I'm in a advanced calculus course to start.
Mm,
That's two semesters,
hmm
and I thought I was like they were teaching the class in Mandarin. Like
hmm
I was so lost from day one.
Sure.
But I also knew I was good at math, so rather than talk to somebody after the decision had been made, I said I'll
Mm,
be able to figure this out. I was
hmm
not. I was being tutored
Yeah.
on. It was not working. So
Yeah.
I knew there were some wrong choices for the college I took. I knew I was going to be transferring, but I also knew that this calc course was really driving down my GPA because I was
Mm-hmm.
basically failing. Like
Right.
the professor said, You're being tutored every day. I'll give you a D just so
hmm
because you're showing the work, but
Right.
you're going to need to retake this course or figure something else out." So I
Yeah.
dropped it.
Okay.
Well, the unfortunate part is that when you try to transfer as a math major without a math course,
Yeah.
colleges aren't going to accept you.
Right.
So I remember taking like logic and axiomatics. I remember taking
hmm
critical thinking, and I'd never realized, like, at first I go, why am I taking these courses? But then as you hit on it, like, well,
hmm
this is what math really is.
Right.
And it was amazing how well those other courses just felt like, yeah, it's the numbers game that I play in my head with different aspects of life, right?
hmm
Like just
hmm
different things. So it really made sense. The only thing I could do at that point, is Dave, as you mentioned, was marketing. It was the only course,
Mm.
major that I could end up choosing that my credits would then transfer towards that degree and not start from day one,
Sure.
essentially.
Yeah.
So I basically thought that I was going to be doing one thing, and within one semester, that dream was now gone because
Mm.
I didn't ask questions and say, "Hey, I probably am not ready for this big lab course. I know my test scores were really strong on it,
hmm
but maybe I should start with Calc 1." I
hmm
didn't say that, and maybe I wouldn't be here today if I would have asked that question.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the things that students can do to avoid what I did and be
hmm
prepared that if they're thinking about being a math teacher, being a math professor, taking math as their degree,
hmm
that they need to be prepared for
Yeah.
and know that, hey, don't set yourself up for failure. Unfortunately,
Sure.
like I may have put myself in.
Yeah. This is a good question. So, by the way, my sister-in-law was a marketing major, and she teaches middle school math, so it is possible. Uh, and she was an athlete. She played softball too. Um, okay. So we're about the same age. Things are different now.
Mhm.
You know, the advising infrastructure at universities is so much more robust than it was when I started college. I mean, my quote advising experience as an undergrad was one of the math professors was my advisor. I would go and see him once a semester. He would hand me my Scantron form. That's how we did it in those days, right? You had to
Mhm.
fill out a Scantron form, and it would get fed through in order of priority, and you crossed your fingers that you were going to get a schedule. He would ask what I wanted to take. I'd tell him, he'd go, okay, that sounds good. And that'd be the end of it. Um, whereas, and I think this is true nationally, but at UF especially, our advising infrastructure is amazing. So we're in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. We have our academic advising center. There's 30 full-time advisors over there, and we have 10,000 students in our college. But um, you know, they know what's up. They know how to help students navigate everything. And then on the front end, during our summer orientation, it's called Preview.
Thanks everyone for being a part of College Knowledge, powered by Elite Collegiate Planning. Just as an FYI, we are guaranteeing that you will save money on college by working with ECP. This is a guarantee that you will pay less. Book a free consultation at elitecollegiateplanning.com.
We have a placement test for math, and chemistry uses the same test because they've found that it predicts well for them too. And students take it online before they get here, and we tell them, take it seriously because we think that first score is the right one.
Mm.
So, and then we have a band of, the various ranges land you in certain courses. If it's at the bottom, college algebra. In the middle, pre-calculus of some flavor. If you score 75 or better, then you can be in calculus 1. Although even then, if you're like 76 to 80, the data shows that those students tend to just kind of squeak by.
Mhm.
We have lots of data about this. Those placement tests actually work pretty well most places are, I think, anymore using what we use, which is called Alex. It's a big company. They developed this thing over several decades, and it's an adaptive test, and it works really well. We let our students take a second attempt if they don't like their first score, but the penalty is there are these review modules that they have to go through, and they have to do 10 hours of them. So this is why we say that first score, take it seriously, because if you think you just take it again, there's a 10-hour do your homework for 10 hours kind of thing, and so, like I said, our success rates are really good, and that's a function of lots of things. One is we have good students. Two, though, is that we have an excellent placement structure, and that works. So, having said all of that, we have students now, of course, who show up. They've got a 5 on the calculus BC exam, which is so weird now, because when I was in school, you either took AB or BC. You didn't do both. Now it's you take AB as a junior and BC as a senior, and it's like Calc 1 for a year and then Calc 2 for a year. It wasn't like that in the 80s. It was just, if you did BC, you did it all at once, and it was like Calc 1 and 2 for the whole year. But fine, I've adapted to that. We have students showing up with 5 on BC exams. Dual enrollment has become such a big thing. So I think you have this in Pennsylvania too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So where, students are taking Calculus 3 at their local college, or even in some cases, they can manage to take it online through UF. And so, what do we do with these students? Now, if they have dual enrollment credit, I mean, they took it at a state college, and we have to accept the credit. But in my experience, though, it's fine. If they took Calc 3 at, UCF down in Orlando, I mean, I trust those mathematicians, that it's a real course. However, some students will have, say, a 5 on the calculus AB exam, and they're going to major in engineering, and the engineering school says you should take Calc 1 again. Or they used to even show up with a 5 on the BC exam, and they say start over in Calc 1. It's different here, and it's true. It is different here, and the fundamental difference is this. Let's say you took calculus AB your senior year. That was the equivalent of Calc 1, which is a 1-semester course. You took it 5 days a week for, however long a school year is. Was that 30 weeks, right? Whereas here, you're going to do it 3 days a week in 15 weeks.
Right.
So it's just much faster paced here. And so that pace, I think, sometimes does catch students off guard. And of course, you have to sort of work a little more independently, because you're not in a classroom of 30 with a teacher who knows your name. You're in a classroom of maybe 200 with, I mean, your TA knows your name, but the instructor probably doesn't. Mm-hmm. So, but in my experience, the AP scores are actually pretty accurate. And so if the student feels confident with their abilities and they got a 5 on the AB exam, they're ready for Calc 2. They don't need to retake Calc 1. Or if they got a 5 on the BC exam, that one's a little trickier, because the sequences and series part of that is the thing that nobody really gets the first time, but I think they're fine to go to Calc 3. And I always use my son as an example. So my son is actually a composer, a musician and a composer. And so, math's not his favorite thing. He can count to 4 really well, but but he took Calc AB his senior year. And his high school is amazing in math. And he got a 4, and that tracks to me. It's like, okay, yeah, if he came to UF, went to class, did his homework, studied, he would make a B in Calc 1. That strikes me as correct. So, students should listen carefully to the advisors, because they actually do know what they're talking about, and, carefully consider their advice. And because everybody has a student's best interest at heart, right? We want students to succeed. We want to put them in the right spot to set them up for that proper success. And that advising infrastructure, like I said, it's gotten so good, so much different than the experience I had when I was a student. And I was fine, but I didn't have an advisor, basically. Mm-hmm. And now students really do have access to that.
I think it's interesting because there is such a push, especially in our area, and I'm sure it's like this around the country, but parents pressure the kids pressure themselves. They've got to take
Hmm.
all the AP classes, get all the
Hmm.
scores to try and place out of stuff in college. And
Yep.
I took calculus one my senior year of high school. I
Hmm.
did not grasp it well enough for sure.
Sure.
I took it in college. I didn't grasp it well enough in college. That was the end of
Sure.
my higher math
Hmm.
period. But I feel like there is such pressure at the high school level between, I don't know if it's trying to save money on college because of the rumor mill that exists on the price of college, because of some of the realities of the price of college, but people are trying to shortcut the system. And I feel like
Hmm.
particularly something like math, where foundation
Yeah.
upon foundation upon foundation. If you skip over that, man, you're gonna lose it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a real problem. I mean, I've often said that I would rather have a student who just had a really good high school algebra and pre-calc preparation than someone who had rushed all the way through differential equations. You know, some students aren't really mathematically mature enough to really absorb that stuff in high school.
But I think
It's not. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
it's not even just mathematically mature.
No,
It's
yeah,
mentally mature
Sure.
enough to
Yeah.
sort of grasp it,
that,
even whether it's math or science. Or I think a
you know,
lot.
that's exactly right. I mean, I observed this with my son, who again, he was a very smart kid, but they they tend to, once you're identified as being in the honors group, they march everybody in lockstep, right? And you know, not everybody's good at everything, right? So, in fact, nobody's good at it's the unusual person who's good at everything. I remember when I was in college, nobody had a 4.0, right? I mean, there were like, so this is Virginia Tech, like 4,000 students in my class, maybe three people had a 4.0. Nobody had a 4,
Nope.
because it's like how would you pull that off?
Hmm.
How do you manage that? And now these days, I have students in tears over they're making an A minus, you know, and I just think that's really unfortunate because once you graduate, nobody cares.
Well,
And,
moreover, on the bigger picture of that, right?
yeah.
We're diminishing this resiliency.
Mhm.
People need to fail, and they
Hmm.
Absolutely.
not fail all the way fail, but like
Yeah.
you need a D and a C. You need to understand how to bounce back from that type of stuff. I find
That's right.
like when you go into the workforce, I don't care if you got a 4.0, you got a 4.7, I don't care what you are. If you didn't do
Mhm.
the job you were asked to do by a superior or advisor, nobody
That's
cares.
right. That's right. That's right.
And you
And
better
and
better be able to take the criticism of that. And all grades are critiques of the work
Mhm.
that you did, right?
Yeah. Well, and especially in something like math where it's like I'm just recording the results,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much subjectivity here. Yeah, I once had a student who came to argue about the A minus he got in calculus, and we were talking, and I mean, he was lawyering me. I like to call it this. Is what he was doing.
Yeah.
And fine, fine. He had a point. I gave him the 3 points he needed. What does it matter in some sense? But he said to me, he said, "I've never made less than an A." And so I looked at him and I said, "Oh, so you're excellent at everything." It had never occurred to him that that's what that's supposed to mean, right?
Yeah.
A means excellent. So you're excellent at everything. I find that hard to believe. Like I'm a pretty smart guy and I made plenty of B's in college. It's not, and I'm suspicious of it in some sense because it's like, um, you're not managing your time and resources properly. If all of your effort is going into making an A in every course, well, okay, I mean, fine, but
What
you're
else are you
better
doing?
at something. What else you're doing, right? And you're better at some things than others. Why are you going to throw so much effort into something, especially something that isn't really maybe one of your major courses? You're taking some course that's not related to your major, but you have to take it, whatever. You're going to kill yourself to make an A in that.
Hmm.
Why? I mean, it's not effective resource management. Um,
Correct.
so, and even classes I enjoyed, I took plenty of history classes in college. I liked them a lot. But, if I made a B, it's like, well, okay, I made a B. I mean, that's how much work I needed to put into that to get. I mean, I didn't want to get a bad grade, but it wasn't my focus. I think students, especially high school, with this idea that you have to be involved in everything and you have to, be in all these clubs and sports and this and that. And anymore, when they get to the university, I've noticed also that they try to keep that up. Mm-hmm. And it's a bad idea. So when I actually talk to parents at preview sometimes, and one piece of advice I tell them to give to their students is, be involved in something outside of academics. That's absolutely great. You should, I mean, I was in Circle K in college, for example, right? And it's a good service organization, and it was valuable experience for me. But that's all I did. I didn't do anything else. I wasn't trying to be in the president of 5 clubs or whatever. And because I think students think they have to do that because that's how high school feels anymore. And it's really not like that at the university. And so I always recommend that to parents. I also tell them my piece of advice to parents. So if parents are listening, when you went to college, cell phones didn't exist. So your kid's fine. Leave them alone a little bit. When they get here, leave them alone a little bit. And, their campus is safe. The town is safe. There's plenty of adults around. Don't text them every hour. Leave them alone.
Well, it's funny. I was out to dinner on Monday night with an administrator in one of the local mm-hmm. high schools. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the cell phone because one of the school districts near us in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, mm-hmm. and no cell phones. You walk in, your cell phone goes in a locker and it gets locked. Mm-hmm. Or like a lock box at the front door. And he said, man, that is impressive. And that's bold is how he put it.
Yeah, that's right.
He goes, he was telling a story about a kid held up his phone in the office and they were threatening to take it away. And mm-hmm. he was talking to his dad. And his dad said, he will sue you if you touch his phone. That's improper search and seizure. And this mm-hmm. led to a discussion about the fact that the most intrusive part of a high school education right now is parents contacting their kids during the day.
Yep.
Like you understand both sides of the story, lockdowns and things like that happen. But like,
sure,
parents, you got to let them learn, right? You got to let them learn because you're not going to be able to stop everything. You can't prevent everything. It's that idea of that lawnmower parent, right?
Yeah. My mom couldn't call me at school. I mean, she could, but she had to call the office.
Yeah. And they call you out of class and then,
it just didn't happen. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, obviously things are moving forward rapidly in the sciences mm-hmm. and the mathematics and that, like, what's the future of this look like? How expansive? And the one other piece to add to that is there's got to be a lot of integrated math classes now you've talked a little bit about data science, computer science. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously actuarial sciences, the engineering. Yep. How's that integration working at the university level?
I wish it worked better. I think some schools do a better job of this than others. Academia by its nature tends to get siloed. Mm-hmm. So we're over here in the math department. Mathematicians by nature are sort of loners, leave us alone kind of thing. I think that's becoming less true. I'm encouraged, so that my younger colleagues, they're much more collaborative in their work. And I think that's a positive development. I mean, some universities are really good at integrating all these things together. Let me plug my alma mater. Virginia Tech is great at this, and not when I was a student. It's come about in the last 20 years, where they have this school of integrated science where they learn the math they learn is embedded in the physics courses, and everything's sort of done in context, which I think is a really interesting model and a good way to do it. At a lot of places, it's still going to be the case where, okay, we're going to teach you calculus. Physics department's going to teach you physics. They need the calculus for that, but we're not really going to talk to each other. I've tried talking to engineering here to say, hey, what do you want us to do? What do you want? Because most of our students in calculus are taking, half of them at least are in engineering, and so what can we do better? And they said, oh yeah, we'll get back to you, and they never did. Mm-hmm. So everybody's just kind of busy. I think here at UF, we've made a big initiative towards artificial intelligence and data science. And a lot of universities are heading in that direction. Here at UF, we're really interested in sort of AI across the curriculum. Mm-hmm. So that's one of our big thrusts moving forward, where, no student's going to be required to, become an expert in artificial intelligence, but we try to build it into essentially everything so that students understand how these things are being used in ways that you might not even be aware of. I mean, and we're all sort of getting used to the AI bots when you're trying to chat with the representative at Delta or whatever. But but so much of that is being automated. And some people are afraid that this is going to mean there aren't, jobs are going to go away. I actually don't think so. I think it's like any new technology. It's going to create a shift, but it's not going to create, a replacement, so to speak. But we also focus a lot on things like the ethics of AI. So our philosophy department, for example, they have a lot of, people in these ethics of data and AI. And, I think people need to understand how math is being used in ways they're not thinking of. And I think having a general awareness of that is extremely important for people. There's an excellent book that came out a few years ago her name's Kathy O'Neill. It's called Weapons of Math Destruction.
Okay.
And I really recommend it because it's talking about how algorithms can be used in ways, sort of nefarious ways. Mm-hmm. Are you going to get a mortgage? I don't know. There's some algorithm back there deciding whether or not you should get a mortgage. And everybody thinks that algorithms are it's just a computer doing something. It's like, yeah, but that program, a person wrote that program. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. So, I
mean, even social media right now, the algorithms they're using is pulling data. That's right. Making some equation to say this, you need to feed more of that. And I think that's right. That's the dangerous side of it, which it sort of guess. I guess the point is it's all these disciplines drift apart, and then all these disciplines like mold together and become intertwined. And it's right. It's wild to think that way.
Yeah. I think it's really, it's an exciting time to be interested in quantitative sciences generally. You know, now that the computers we have now are so powerful, my phone's way more powerful than my first computer ever was, and at UF we have, I think it's the biggest GPU cluster at a university in the world, because we got a big gift a few years ago. One of the founders of NVIDIA is an alumnus of the university, and so we got a $50 million GPU cluster.
Wow!
And so the computing power on this campus is just amazing. And so, students who are kind of interested in this can, if you can learn to work with these big computers and run all this data, there's so much out there that we can still figure out. And I'm not an AI doomer. I know we've all seen Terminator, but I don't think we're going to get there. Because
iRobot's the one that's the.
Look, the picture still, the humans in the picture still have 6 fingers half the time, right? I'm not a doom and gloom person there. I think but having said that, there are things we don't understand about it. Like, we know these things work, but the underlying mathematics is still kind of a mystery. And so, if I were starting over in mathematics, that might be something that I would actually aim towards. Is trying to understand the sort of the guts of this black box that is getting used. And you can sort of say what each step is, but then the outcome is kind of very weird. And the first person who comes up with a good theorem about why this deep learning works the way it does is going to rock the world, basically. So
off topic, but when you said start over, I have 3 young kids. I know Dave has 4. I feel like I'm starting over with the way that math is being taught to these kids.
Yeah.
I had a comedian that was one of my favorite lines ever. He said, the way we're teaching math right now, it's not about the kids necessarily getting the right answer, but figuring out how they got the answer. It's more important of how you got there versus actually having the correct answer. It was a joke, but I said, okay, I kind of get that. It almost feels that that's where because it's definitely taught differently than I was when I was younger. So math, you wouldn't think that math evolves, right? It's one of those things like, wait a minute, it's numbers. Like, they've been doing math forever. So what have been some of the thought processes and why have things changed so much? Is there a reason behind that?
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. So I think that is a misconception about math, that it's this static thing.
Mm-hmm.
And because you might ask, what is mathematics research? Like what is there to do? And and again, it's this joke of arithmetic with bigger numbers. That's not it at all. Math is actually, the way I describe math is we're just looking for patterns.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what we're doing. Pretty much at any math problem kind of comes down to what's the underlying pattern? What's the structure that's driving what's going on here? So, yeah, the people who complain about the way math's being taught now, it's funny. It's like, well, wait a minute, you hated it when you were growing up, now you're mad that we're doing it different, so yeah, that's. I think it's important for students to actually understand what they're doing. I mean, so for example, I still remember my first mathematical difficulty. I remember this was in second grade. I got sick for a couple of days and I missed a couple of days of school. And we were adding columns of numbers, just 2-digit numbers, and you're adding them up. Okay, so you add it up and you have to, you get to the bottom and the first column added up to 17 or whatever. You put the 7 down, carry the 1. Okay, what does that even mean, first of all? What does carry the 1 even mean?
Right.
I don't think when you're 7, you really understand what it is. In other words, we got so busy teaching rote procedure, and you could get the right answer, but you had no clue what you were doing. Okay. So I missed a couple of days. I came back and then the columns got longer. Okay. So I started adding, and then I added the first column and it came to 23 or whatever it came to. I put down the 3, and what did I do? I carried the 1. Right? Well, you carry the 1. That's what you do.
Right.
Okay. And so, I got all these problems wrong. And then my teacher said, well, but to add it up to 23, you carry the 2. I was like, oh, okay. I still didn't really understand what was going on. I don't know. I mean, I was 7. I don't remember. But, so this emphasis on rote procedure. Look, I mean, you need to know how to compute. Like, I don't believe in handing a 7-year-old a calculator and say, push the buttons to get the answer. Like, I think you need a basic understanding. But we don't really teach long division very much anymore, right? And I still remember, page after page of long division problems in 4th grade or whatever.
R3.
So emphasizing more understanding of what's actually going on, I think helps students later when you get to the more abstract things. Okay, because algebra is really just kind of abstract arithmetic. And when the letters start to enter the game, and this is my experience too, when people tell me they hate math, which every cocktail party, what do you do? I'm a mathematician. Ugh, I hated math. It's the only subject that's acceptable to say, right? You can't say, I hated reading. It's like, okay. But anyway, and what I figured out over the years is that what people mean by that is, they were fine because no 7-year-old hates math. They were fine until they get to where the letters start showing up, basically. Yeah. Or in some cases, fractions. We teach people how to add fractions, and again, it was a sort of very, just procedural thing where, I mean, the quick and dirty is you multiply the denominators together and you cross money. Okay. Yep. Or you find the lowest common denominator, et cetera, But, you lose sight of, okay, why am I doing this? Why do I need to add 1/17 and 3/9? I mean, or whatever. I mean, why? Why would I ever need to do that? And the answer is those particular ones you don't. But, again, later in life, let's say you're, doing some woodworking, right? You have experience. I mean, I've had to replace, or put new baseboards in, right? You got to measure, and you need to be able to read the ruler and know what you're doing. And I have to come this far in, and this, so it does actually come up later, but we just kind of, we take it all out of context. Here are these things and this process, and that's bad. One time I taught, this was 20 years ago, I taught trigonometry in the summer, and I just, I hadn't taught the course before. I was like, well, it was last minute. I'll just do what everybody else has done. And I pick this thing up and I'm like, this is, who cares, I mean, really, I mean, it was, and it's such a shame because trigonometry, of course, was extremely important in ancient civilizations, right? You use triangles. I mean, triangles are, that's what it's about, and then just like plowing through these trigonometric identities, which, okay, fine, you need two of them, you don't need all of these things. So I think it's way more important to teach students to learn how to think about problems, learn how to approach problems, so that, yeah, the right answer matters. Of course it does. But if you, and this is how I grade exams, if I'm looking at someone's work and they, it's a calculus problem, might be a lot of steps. It's always the algebra. Calculus actually isn't hard. There's just one idea in calculus. It's the algebra that trips everybody up. But you get through the end and you make some dumb arithmetic error and you get the wrong answer. Well, okay, you knew what you were doing. You just be more careful next time, kind of thing. And teaching students how to think and approach problems is way more important. And that's what, I don't think they call it Common Core anymore, but that's basically what it was. And I understand people's frustration with it because they felt like, well, wait a minute, I already know how to do this. Why do I have to learn how to do it again? I've been to school, right? And so it can be frustrating to try to help your child when you don't know the thing that the teacher's trying to teach them to do. But I think people should just be a little more open-minded about it. I think useful.
No, I mean, I love it because I know my kids when they're in second and third grade, they're basically what they're being taught is algebra right now.
Right, right.
It's pre-algebra, the way that they are learning to solve mathematical problems right now, simple, very simple things. And I'm kind of impressed by it, but yeah.
It makes sense to me.
With the new math
new math makes sense to me.
Well, right. So
old math was just memorize it.
That's right.
This is how you get the answer versus now this is why you're doing this step of the equation. This is why you're doing
that's
that.
right.
There's much more of a why, which I do appreciate.
Yeah, my wife was the same way. So my wife's an artist, and so math was just never her thing growing up. But now as an adult, she goes, it makes more sense to her because she kind of learned how to see it more visually. And we've, and I think the new ways of doing things do capitalize on more visual techniques. That's really useful. There's lots of ways to look at stuff. And so, just teaching students one algorithm, it's like, this is how you do it. It's like, well, okay, yeah, there might be another way to do it.
Yeah. Sure. Lastly, I just wanted to, as my final question for today, we obviously use a software called the College Planning Network, a website. It's a portal to help families really find the right schools. If a student is looking for, potentially being a math major, they have the ability to say, hey, I want to look at this state, this size schools that also have this major of mathematics. It hits me from our conversation today that you may want to add a couple majors in there, that making sure that the school may have a complementary piece if you need to shift. Is that something that one is a definite, or is it pretty basic across any university? If they have math as a major, they also have some of these complementary where an easy shift might happen based on your passion and what you like.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody has a math major. Statistics may or may not. A lot of universities don't have separate statistics departments. We do. At some places, it's becoming more common. Of course, computer science used to always be in a math department. So 50 years ago, there were no computer science departments. They were just part of math. So yeah, having statistics as a major is a useful thing, but it might just be a major within the math department, and that's fine. Some universities have combined math stats departments. Which can cause friction in the department, but it's generally okay. Data science is becoming increasingly broad. Data science programs are sort of interesting in that some of them are I would call more like data analytics. There's not very much math and stats in them, believe it or not. You sort of get to a basic level, and then you kind of learn more disciplinary data analysis type techniques that aren't so mathematical. We built ours to be very math and stats and coding heavy, to where students can then basically go be data scientists in any discipline, you know, and I think so if a student's thinking about data science, they might want to look carefully at what the program actually entails. And you can find these things online, you know, you go to the departments and check. So in our case, you know, there's a lot of math and stats and coding and things like that. So that's really good. But most big universities are going to have all of these things.
Got it. Okay.
And you know, of course, UF's a great place to be, but you know, by law, our state university system has to be something like 93% in state. So, you know, we're a big state, so we don't have trouble filling our classes. But, you know, out of state students here, I think UF might be about 10%.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, you guys are in Pennsylvania, Penn State, great university. Yep. I mean, you know, winners in Happy Valley, not so much, but, you know, but you know, they have all this stuff too. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's sort of a general awareness that students aren't always going to stick with the first thing.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it's the rare 18-year-old who knows exactly what they want to do and they don't deviate. And
for sure. The rare 15-year-old.
Or the rare 15-year-old, sure. But you know, but as far as math goes, I mean, again, your experience sort of gets to this. It's like, you think you know what a math major is because of how you learned it through school, and it's just a different vibe once you get past the first year or two.
Yeah.
And which is not to say that it's not, you know, that wouldn't still be for you as a student, but just be prepared for that very weird shift to, you know, you're not just cranking equations, you're writing.
Yeah.
You know, you're a writer, and you know, that's it.
Yeah. This was fantastic.
Agreed.
I know we're out of time. So many great takeaways for families, especially I know one that really stuck out to me was about being involved, and you don't have to be great, you know, or excellent at everything, and focus on, you know, manage your time wisely. And college life is not the same as high school life to spread yourself too thin, you know.
That's right.
You don't have to be involved in everything. That was a great takeaway that I hope a lot of parents understood. And hey, give your kids some space in college. Yeah. So Kevin Knudson, thank you so much. University of Florida, Department of Mathematics. This was a great conversation. I know I got a ton out of it. It's right up my alley, but I know it's definitely going to be a great listen for a lot of our families that listen. Thank you so much. Guys, this has been another great episode of College Knowledge, and we will see you again next week. All right, sir.
Awesome stuff. We want to help. Send your questions to info@collegeknowledge.net. These can be about college, finances, careers, and anything else you have questions on.